Have you ever wondered what actually happens inside your cat's body when you feed them wet food every single day? Most owners think of it as a little treat, something in extra, something that doesn't really matter in the long run. That assumption might be completely wrong. Some of the changes that come from a daily wet food habit show up within just a few weeks. Others take months and even years to fully reveal themselves. And there's one particular effect, one that almost nobody talks about, that every cat owner should understand before making this switch permanent. Stick with me. Because by the end of this, you'll know exactly what's going on and whether it's helping your cat or quietly working against them. Let's start with something most people never even think about: water. Cats by nature don't drink very much. That's not laziness, that's biology. Their ancestors came from the desert, where prey provided most of the moisture they needed. So a cat's brain never developed a strong thirst drive, the way a dog's did. That's a problem, because dry food is almost completely dehydrated. Most kibble contains only around 10% moisture. Wet food, on the other hand, is usually 75 to 80% water. That's not a small gap. That's a completely different relationship with fluid intake. And moisture status matters more than most people realize because proper hydration supports kidney function and helps flush the urinary tract. Exactly where so many cats run into trouble as they age. Think about it this way. A cat eating only dry food may spend years taking in less water than his body actually wants. Nothing looks wrong. There's no symptom, no warning sign, until one day a kidney or urinary problem finally shows up, seemingly out of nowhere. Switch that same cat to a wet food routine, and fluid intake climbs dramatically, almost without the cat even noticing it's happening. That's the quiet power of one simple change, especially for indoor cats and senior cats, the two groups most prone to kidney and bladder issues later in life. But hydration is only the beginning. Digestion is next. For many cats, wet food can be easier on the stomach than dry formulas, and the reason comes right back to that water content. Moisture helps food move through the digestive tract more efficiently, which can reduce constipation, something that becomes more common with age. It can also support smoother nutrient absorption, meaning the body actually uses more of what it's eating, instead of letting it pass through unused. Now that doesn't mean every wet food is automatically superior. Ingredient quality still matters. A lot. A cheap can loaded with fillers can still cause digestive upset. So it's never simply wet versus dry. It's about what's actually inside the can. Still, many veterinarians find that cats tolerate a quality wet diet really well. And owners often notice smaller, more consistent litter box habits within the first couple of weeks. It's a small detail, but usually one of the first signs that something inside is working better. And if the stomach is happier, what happens to the waistline? Weight management might be easier than you'd expect. Wet food generally has lower calorie density per bite, thanks to all that water content, so cats often feel full sooner than they would on an equivalent amount of dry kibble. That built-in sense of fullness can support natural portion control, and in many cats it reduces overeating throughout the day. This is one reason vets sometimes recommend shifting overweight cats toward more wet food. But not all wet foods are low calorie. Some pâté style or premium formulas pack in more fat per ounce than you'd expect. So portion sizes still need attention, and it's worth checking the label rather than assuming wet automatically means lighter. Still, for a cat carrying a few extra pounds, this shift alone has helped plenty of owners see real progress on the scale, without feeling like they're starving their pet. But body weight isn't the only thing that changes. Muscle, energy, and healthy aging come next. And this one surprises a lot of owners. Many wet foods contain a higher percentage of animal protein than their dry counterparts, often in the range of 10 to 11% on an as-fed basis, which translates to a meaningfully higher share once you account for the water. Animal protein is exactly what supports lean muscle mass, and that becomes especially important as cats enter their senior years, when muscle loss naturally accelerates and mobility starts to decline. The amino acids in high-quality animal protein don't just maintain muscle. They support energy levels and immune function too. Here's the nuance that matters. It's not just how much protein is in the food. It's the quality of that protein. A food listing real meat first will almost always outperform one built on protein isolates or byproducts. Get the quality right, and you'll often notice something even before your veterinarian points it out at the next checkup. Maybe it's a cat who's more playful. Maybe it's one who's willing to jump onto the counter again. Or maybe it's just a little more steady on their feet than they were a year before. Your cat's coat is often one of the first places where a nutrition becomes visible. Better hydration from the inside tends to show up on the outside, often as a shinier coat and less dry, flaky skin. Many wet foods are also formulated with essential fatty acids that support the skin barrier directly. In many cases, the fur becomes noticeably healthier, long before any blood work would ever show a nutritional improvement. Give it a few weeks. Run your hand along your cat's back. You may feel less of that dry, brittle texture so many owners just assume is a normal part of aging, when really it's often a sign the body wasn't getting enough moisture in the first place. But despite every one of these benefits, there's one concern that comes up almost every single time this topic gets brought up, and it deserves a straight answer. Does wet food damage your cat's teeth? This is probably the single biggest myth surrounding wet food. A lot of people assume dry kibble scrubs on cats' teeth clean, like a toothbrush, while wet food just sits there causing decay. The truth is, that's mostly marketing, not science. Most cats don't chew kibble long enough for any meaningful scraping action to occur. They swallow the pieces almost whole. Dental disease in cats is driven primarily by plaque and bacteria along the gum line, not by the texture of the food. Wet food on its own doesn't cause the dental problems, and dry food on its own doesn't prevent them. What actually protects your cat's teeth is consistent care, regular brushing when possible, dental-specific treats, routine veterinary cleanings. Feeding wet food every day doesn't add any meaningful dental risk as long as hygiene isn't ignored entirely. Some veterinary dentists will even tell you the type of food matters far less than the consistency of care behind it. Now, to be fair, wet food isn't perfect either. Once opened, it spoils quickly, so leftovers need to go in the fridge and get used within a day or two. It typically costs more than dry food, sometimes noticeably more if you're feeding a larger cat. Some cats become picky eaters if they're only ever given one texture, which can make future diet changes harder down the road. And because it's less calorie dense, very active or larger cats may need bigger portions to meet their energy needs, which adds to both the cost and the prep time. None of this cancels out the benefits, but it's worth going in with realistic expectations, rather than assuming wet food solves everything with no trade-offs at all. So after walking through hydration, digestion, weight, muscle, coat health, and finally clearing up the dental myth, what's the honest takeaway? There's no single perfect diet that works identically for every cat. The benefits here are real: better fluid intake, easier digestion, healthier weight management, stronger muscle support, and improved coat condition. But they depend on choosing a quality product with real, identifiable ingredients. Some owners find that a mix of wet and dry feeding gives them the best of both worlds, and that approach can work well for many cats. If your cat has a specific medical condition, from kidney disease to diabetes to urinary issues, loop in your veterinarian before making any permanent change. Some conditions call for very specific adjustments. Your cat can't choose what's in the bowl. You do. And that small decision, repeated every single day, may influence their kidneys, their weight, their mobility, and even how they age over the next 10 or 15 years. So instead of asking whether wet food is just a treat, maybe the better question is this: is your cat getting the nutrition their body was actually designed for?